Okay, I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about the surprises I found doing the research for the exhibition I curated, which is, I also work with Jesse Lerner. It's called MexLA, Mexican Modernisms in Los Angeles, 1930 to 1985. Because the exhibition is quite complex, there's a lot of art. So I'm just going to try to concentrate on this question about the difficulties and the surprises in researching, this subject matter, right? I guess even though I did not have a lot of time to research our show as some of the other shows that we've been hearing about, because where from what I hear they were working for 7 years, and ours really we worked probably like I worked on it like actually for a year, if not really 6 months. However, I feel very lucky to have this opportunity to work on this show, even if it was for a short amount of time, because the cause that led to that short amount of time also led to a lot of freedom for me that I don't think otherwise I would have had. So in that sense, I think at the end it was worth it, and I was able to do certain things that perhaps otherwise would have been more difficult. Saying that, this is a subject that I suppose appears even in my thesis from the Academy of San Carlos, where I studied and Tere mentioned. I also want to thank, obviously, the Fowler Museum for the invitation to be here. I must say that this is one of my favorite museums. I remember this, the Muffler Man show and the Nick Cave show, and there's a lot of shows that have happened here, and usually it's not a museum that you hear a lot about, considering the other big museums, but often has shows that I found more interesting. And also, in my research, I hope it doesn't sound like a commercial for the Chicano Studies Center here, because it helped me a lot. I mean, I want to thank, obviously, Michael Stone and Noriega. But here's the story. I mean, I guess I thought that there were certain things that I was going to find very easily, because there were some artists that I thought were very well known and whose work would be was collected. And I thought that there would be these other strange artists or more known artists that it would be very difficult to find because they were less known, and I would have to do research and primary research and so on. But the reality is actually work often quite the other way around. So, for example, for me to find the work of Carlos Almaraz, who I thought, he's very recognized, his work is in major collections, that's going to be easy, ended up being very difficult. I couldn't actually, for example, this painting, Tallow Green Car Crash, that belongs to the Los Angeles County Museum, I couldn't get, despite the fact that it is in the collection of LACMA and it is not in display. So it's not in display, but they also don't lend it. And it was very difficult for me. Or for example, the work of Robert Hildemontes, who was widely collected in the 80s. It was very difficult. The gallery didn't have track of where the work was. I had to find a collector in Washington to get the work. So then, the work that was supposed to be difficult ended up being a total whole new world and a surprise. And so I'm going to start first with, maybe some of you guys know this guy here. It's Ricardo Alber. This is actually one of his pieces. It's a portrait that I think was taken by Lara Aguilar. And I'm going to start with him because I guess my whole encounter with him has become kind of a metaphor of sorts. I guess I met Ricardo a long time ago as I came to Los Angeles, because he was supposed to help me. He was supposed to help artists. He introduced himself. He was introduced to me as this collector from Los Angeles that was a member of CACA, right? Which I thought, that doesn't sound like a collector group. It was like, Chicano collectors from Aztlán or something like that. And people, friends of mine in Mexico, told me to go meet him because he had supported them before. Among them, Adulo Patinho and his brother Armando Cristeto. Well, turns out when I started working on this project, and I started talking to people, I started talking to John, I started talking to Rita, I started talking to Andine. Rita suggested to me to go see the work of Ricardo Alber. And I didn't take that I didn't take that very seriously, to be honest. Because I remember him and I thought, you know, I mean, well, I probably remember him with a camera and saying to me that he was a photographer, but I don't remember him ever showing or seeing his work. And I remember seeing the work of a lot of other artists and photographers, among them Harry and Boa, and, you know, in shows in Mexico City, you know, Coloquio Latinoamericana Fotografía and so on. So then I went, somehow, in the Chicano Study Center, I was referred, they said, yeah, look at these slides. I find the slides very interesting. I went with his widow. Her widow had the Vanguardia Ranchera or something. I really have never seen anything like this. I mean, I found this work really experimental, not just in the context of here, but in the context of Latin American photography. It's very unique, very playful. It's a kind of, I mean, obviously it makes references to modernism and other, but it does it in a way that I found it very playful and very interesting. He also played with color photography, using processes that I haven't pictured. Because it's not really seed prints or, I mean, they are kind of like these, almost like what I would have called neographica years ago, right? Like, you know, some kind of perhaps playing with xeroxes and other photomechanic processes. And sometimes retouching the photographs. Here's like, this one's also very, you know, a little bit out of range there. This kind of lowrider pop thing. So for me, then again, as I said, you know, I met this guy, he was supposed to help me, and now I am here showing his work. And totally, you know, reconfiguring the role of things in the universe. Okay, here's, this is the work, this is one piece that, of Adulo Patinho, who actually Ricardo helped along. And not just Ricardo, but also Robert Gil de Montes. Adolfo was an artist from Mexico City, and like a lot of us, I suppose, came to Los Angeles having this dream that, you know, I'm going to go to Los Angeles, I'm going to make a lot of money, and then I'll go to New York and eventually Paris. But that did not happen. He came to Los Angeles and he had some shows in, I suppose, in self-help graphics with the help of Robert Gil de Montes. Adolfo was this complicated character, eventually died, he had a tragic death not long ago. I should also mention that Ricardo Alber unfortunately had a tragic death. Ricardo Alber died of cancer, actually rather young. Adolfo fell in an accident from a building, I mean from the 6th floor of a building. But anyway, this is kind of an installation that that Adolfo did in the house of Robert Gil de Montes. And so it's, I think it's this Duchampian gesture of traveling in his suitcase. He had this art. This is another piece by Adolfo. Now here's the paradox, right? I mean, here we have Adolfo Patinho, when he goes back to Mexico, makes this big flag, which is a tapestry, it was produced in Guadalajara. And all of a sudden it seems that he ends up making this rather Chicano art piece, I would say. You know? Which of course goes to all, you know, because we could discuss about this a lot more, but you know, try to be brief first, maybe that later. Well, okay, now I'm going to show you guys this, I guess the Chicano work of the Eames, Ray Eames and Charles Eames. But turns out that I found, Charles and Ray were very interested in, and I guess in the context of the discussion, I'm going to say that some, for example, these artists who are very well known, I mean, I guess the Eames are as recognized as it gets, you know, for artists in Los Angeles. Still, we know some of their work and not other work, and sometimes certain parts of the work actually can become difficult to, if not to find, at least to figure out how it works, right? Because here, all of a sudden, I found like thousands of slides that were taken in Mexico that I think he used to make a film, this film, which was like a Day of the Dead documentary. But the photographs by themselves, we could presume had some sort of photographic value. Some of these images, like this one, or perhaps this one, in fact seem rather very similar to some contemporary work produced now in Mexico that is still kind of regurgitating basic, I mean, modernism, I suppose, using local textures. I was not so interested in these images, but perhaps more in these ones that are rather enigmatic, and they are, you know, we have these accidents in the images. For example, here this juxtaposition between these two images, and I like them, but I don't know if these things were intentional, if he attempted to do this, if it was part of his work. What am I supposed to do with this? So I printed them, I selected them, I liked them, I presented them as his work because it was among his work. But in a way, I do not fully know if it was the case, or if I'm really reinventing this or creating this sort of fantasy. So in that and in a different way, because I was able to talk to the artists, I was able to present the work of John Valadez, some of his photo work. He's obviously more known as a painter. But he has this body of these photographs that he used as sources for his images that I thought were rather compelling as photographs. And he has shown them. I mean, I know that Robert had some of these as photographs. There were all sort of issues, right? Because, you know, we had to print them, they were on digital files, the digital files were not necessarily of the best quality. But at least I was able to talk with John. I guess it's still probably perhaps a work in progress in a sense, you know, it has been improved. I find this work rather compelling. When I asked John about this show, when I told him about the show, he suggested this piece to be included in the show. But it turns out that this piece is falling apart, was painted with felt pen, the felt pen cannot resist the light, and so the piece could not really be shown. There were other drawings of him that we were able to locate. And then Pilar asked me if she could get one of these drawings that we were able to locate. The drawings that we were able to locate, I could not really lend them to Pilar because they were borrowed to me by one of the board members of the museum, and they wanted to show in the museum, and they were already, you know, there were two of them. But then Pilar asked me about this other drawing called Disco Debbie. And then I said, well, I don't know about Disco Debbie. And he's like, well, it seems that it's in the attic of your house. So I thought, what are you talking about? So then it became like this very weird story that was almost like one of those like you know, TV show things where you go into the attic and you find this treasure, and it's like, and turns out that I bought my house from Robert Hildemontes. Robert had this drawing. Robert said to me, you know, go to the attic and maybe there's this drawing there. So I go to the attic and I found this roll, and it's all very damaged. It was all eaten by the bugs, but there's this area. And of course now the question is how, I mean, are we going to restore? It costs some money to restore, but I was quite surprised that, talking about phantom sightings, there was this phantom in my ceiling, scary. And to conclude, I'm going to show you guys, this is another story. We also find the work of, in the Chicano Central Study, we find the work of Cyclona. I had never heard of Cyclona. So we found these things. Jennifer Sternard had written about Cyclona, and we start hearing all these, you know, the legend of Cyclona, right? And so how come I hadn't heard about Cyclona? How have I heard of these things? The work seemed to be very interesting, you know, these performances. The archive was complete. And so the whole debate is like, well, we haven't heard, what did he do? Did he not do this? Well, here's the archive. I mean, and the archive in itself seemed of interest. So, well, if it's here, it's here. It means that, you know, and it seems of interest, so let's present. I also find these things that have like boxes and boxes of these food wrappers in UCLA, and I was thinking, you know, who's paying UCLA to collect you know, food wrappers of Mexican food? And then I thought, who would want this crap? And of course I thought, me. Because, you know, it's like a time capsule, right? So all of a sudden you think it might not be valuable at all. It could be valuable if we make it valuable, right? So, I mean, believe it or not, of all the stuff that I'm presenting in the show, the curator of the museum, who's this woman from Venezuela, and that used to work in Miami and is very interested in this South America. Of all the artists that I have, she's particularly interested in Cyclona, despite the fact, you know, so all of a sudden, anyway, and to conclude here, I have this, again, Frank Lloyd Wright, I guess the Chicano period, Frank Lloyd Wright, should I say. And then Frank Lloyd, well, I found these photographs. This one is the Eames house. I assume he printed it. I mean, this photo was taken by his son. I assume it was printed sepia because of the interest of making it look like a Mayan. Even despite the fact that Frank Lloyd Wright never publicly mentions that the Eames house has a Mayan influence. I assume that here, I mean, it is presented like this Mayan ruin because it is the way the photograph was printed. After the house was finished, Schulman took photographs of the house in its most pristine way, you know, as the modernist propaganda that he does. But the house soon became in disrepair because the structure of the house was weak, and he used these blocks that fall apart. So then he took these photographs of the house. This is the house in ruins, right? I mean, this one I call it the Cenote Sagrado of the house. And this one you can see that there's Eames furniture and everything is there. So all of a sudden we have these almost like noirish photographs, or they almost look like, also look like LAPD, you know, like crime scene photographs. And so once again, I mean, I don't know, he was hired to do this, he never presented them, but I think perhaps this might be more interesting than the other images that he had, and we are taking the freedom to sort of consider that these things are valuable and sort of reinventing them, which perhaps in a way is what always happened with his work, because the work that we know of him is work that was selected by other persons to present something else in magazines. It's not necessarily that it was his authorship or his vision, but also what was demanded from him. So I hope that this would make us perhaps think a little bit about these surprises and research and things. Thank you.